All right, so what we decided before you got here was I'm going to start doing the some of the extra labs that I didn't assign for y'all as grades in class as a teaching tool. So rather than me lecturing over stuff you've already read in the book and then in the book, I'm just going to do examples with everybody. And it also, if you come up with questions from the ones that are assigned, I'll address those too. And I'm just going to videotape what we're doing in class for the online students to look at too. I'm not getting a lot of questions from the online students, so I don't know what would be helpful for them at all. So maybe they're watching these, maybe they're not. If they are, great. If they're not, oh well. I tried. So I assigned 4.14, but I didn't assign 15, right? If my memory is right. So I thought we would do that. We'll do this one together. If we have enough time, we'll do the next 16 also didn't get assigned because I felt like it was one that we do a lot where we make count letters and stuff. So I tried to pick the interesting ones for you guys to do. May not have worked, but so in this one, so the directions are the statistics are often calculated with varying amounts of input data. Write a program that takes in any number of non-negative integers as input and outputs the maximum and the average. A negative integer ends the input and is not included in the statistics. Assume the input contains at least one non-negative integer. Output the average with 2 digits, and it gives us the formatting line for how to output it with the 2 digits. Everybody good so far? So if we were doing this, or if I was doing this, first thing I would do is go through and try to figure out what I need. So I know I need to sum up all of the numbers that are entered because to get the average, you have to have the sum divided by the number, right? So I need to know how many numbers there are, and I need to know what the total sum of the numbers is. So those are things that we could do inside of our loops. One thing that loops do really well is accumulate data or sum up data. Also, I want to do this until I get a negative number. Anytime it says do until or do while, should kick into your brain that you want to use a while loop instead of a for, because it's a true or false kind of test. So we're going to get input while something's true, right? So first thing I know I need is a while loop. While input. Does it tell me any specific variables I have to use? And y'all correct me if I throw Python in here because I taught Python all this morning and I kept putting Java syntax in my Python. So I'm assuming I'm gonna do the reverse with you guys and try to write Python instead of Java. So sorry if I do. So I know that I want, while the n value is greater than or equal to 0, I want to I want to add them together. So want to, it says integers, okay. So I know I need sum as a variable. Huh?
So it's N, that's our variable here.
Yeah, N's gonna be a variable.
We have to initialize it, so
Yeah, we were gonna have to initialize.
I was kind of confused, I'm like, oh, what's it?
So I program in kind of a weird way. I kind of make myself an outline of what I'm doing.
Okay,
So I know I want this while loop to work. So now I'm gonna backtrack and figure out what pieces I need.
okay,
So if I'm summing things up, I need to declare sum and set it equal to 0 before the loop, right? Because if you created sum inside the loop, it would just reset itself every time. I'm going to need to know what n is. So n is also going to be an integer. I'm going to initialize it to 0 because I always initialize numbers to 0. This makes my life easier. And then we're going to have to get the value, right? So how do I get input from a new line?
sorry, what was the question you asked?
I don't think it gave me enough information here. Look, I have the examples. Oh, yeah, this one. I was looking for this one.
I would say N is 0 as well.
I always initialize number variables to 0. I always do, just because until I use it, it doesn't have any value in it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I called it in here they called it user int. I gotta get used to their terminology. But we need the scanner object because I was fixing to use Python input statements and that's not going to work. So you need the scanner object because you got to get input from the user, right? Right. And then we want to put all that into N. I wish I had 2 screens. Yeah, scanner next end. So N is going to become right. Does that make sense? So while that number is larger than 0 or is equal to 0, as long as it's not negative, we're going to add it together to get a sum. Then eventually we're going to do an average. So I'm going to need a value to hold average. And average can, I would do it as a double. I don't know what they would do it as, but I would do it as a double because once you start doing division, you have decimal numbers left over. I want to also set it up to be equal to 0 for right now because we haven't done anything in it yet. And we also are going to need a max value. Assuming it could be an int because all the inputs are going to be max, are going to be ints. Right? Does that make sense?
Correct.
It seems like this, most of the variables I need. Let's see, I need max, average, input. My question here is, with what we have now, how do we know? Shouldn't the scanner N also be inside the loop? Because that's the only way we keep asking for more inputs, right? So I would put this.
Let me ask you this as well. I may be jumping ahead, but wouldn't wouldn't you have to store the sum?
Yeah, we are gonna store the sum. So we have created some here outside the loop. So while we're doing it in the loop, it just accumulates. And then I'll be able to do something with it outside of the loop because we initialized the variable before we used it. If I had done it inside the loop, it would, the scope of it would only let it be in the loop, and we wouldn't be able to do average with it later. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what this is gonna let us do, if we move this, if we do it this way, right now, line 8 is only gonna run once. Right, because it's not inside of the loop, so you're only gonna get one input. So we need to move that line inside of the while loop, right? So that's another reason for going ahead and setting it up equal to 0, so that its initial value allows the while loop to start. Does that make sense? It's not a negative number, but it doesn't affect our sum either. So I'm gonna take this line and move it inside of here. Right? So if I ran the program now, I don't like that it won't tell you what it does. Oh, it expects input. Let's put in some input. So if I put in 12, here's input. It did not like that. Why doesn't it like that? Hmm. Okay, it didn't put it inside the loop. It did put it inside the loop down here. Why is it not working? Maybe I should stop videotaping myself doing live code. Don't laugh at me. It happens to the best of us. Too bad y'all don't have a solution to look at when you're working on it, right? I did exactly what.
I know some of the typos where it's like, it has precise.
Do you think it's not? Okay.
It probably
Watch it.
means that's how they do it.
Watch me not post this video because I just want to not let anybody else know that I'm stupid. All right, so that's their code exactly. Let's run it into that. I copied and pasted the line they said I had an error on from there. See? Did you just see me copy and paste their entire? I copied and pasted the entire thing.
If
It didn't like my commas on the
Yeah, I think
inputs.
it was the comma.
Okay. Hey, Zybooks is really picky. If you put commas in your inputs, it loses its mind. Okay. I'm sorry. Hey, let's look at this code and see why it's this way. Let's just go over the code. Y'all want to just go over code, right? That's so much easier. So looking at the code, and I'm gonna have to stand over here because that's the only way that the highlights will show up on the video. You always have to have a scanner to scan in from the things. They didn't set initial values for their variables. You absolutely cannot set initial values. You can leave them as empty. In my experience, I don't like doing this because there invariably comes a time that you've written a whole lot of code and you don't realize that you haven't initialized it, and you try to use it with a null value in it, and then you get a null pointer exception thrown at you, and you're like, I don't understand why I got a null pointer exception, and it's just so I usually always, especially numbers, put something in them. Make them equal to 0. Zybooks will probably hate this, but I would just go in and make them all equal to 0, because that way I can't accidentally try to divide some before I put something in it. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
They did it down here, which doesn't make sense to me. Why put those lists in there when you could have done it up here? So I'm going to see what Zybooks thinks about that. Okay, so it's okay with that too. There's no reason to do it in 2 places. Go ahead, initialize it, and put in the default value or the starting value. It's just so much easier. Will make your life, it makes so much more sense in my head visually if you just go ahead, create it, and initialize it to something. That makes sense? Now, they initialize num_ints to a negative number, and you can absolutely do that. You can make it a negative number, and then they get their first value before the loop, and then continue on. If you had left this 0, you could actually check it, wait and check it after the loop runs the first time. Does that make sense? So if you were building like a menu structure using a while loop, you would want to set it up where it automatically ran the first time and posted all the menu options out there. Questions? Have I completely confused you yet?
You pretty much answered the question I was gonna ask.
Why is it done in 2 different places?
Yeah.
It does not need to be done in 2 different places. That to me it's absolutely a style thing. Because you'll learn as you code, the more you code, the more you'll build up your own personal coding style. That's the reason after I get to know students for a long period of time, especially when I used to teach high school and would have a student an entire year, I could look at the code and know that they didn't write it, because they develop a style of how they write it. And if their code looks exactly like somebody else's code, word for word, letter for letter, you knew you had a cheating problem. Because what you name a variable and what I name a variable are going to vary slightly. Like I would not have done user int. I'd have just done input or, something shorter. I wouldn't have made it a double word. I wouldn't have done num_int, sum_ints. I'd have just gone sum, num, average, I'd have just made them very, but that's me because I'm lazy. I'm going to type as little as I possibly can for variable names, as long as they're clear. Now, I'm not saying you can go use X, Y, and Z on all your variables. So do that. Do make them like average or sum or something like that. But so the while loop is a good choice for continuing to get input, because you're just checking for whether or not the statement is true or false. right? You have an if statement inside of there, so you're gonna nest a conditional statement in there to check to see if the value you got is greater than the current max. If it is, then you're gonna replace max with the new number. If it's not, you're gonna leave max alone. Does that make sense? So every time you get a number in, you're gonna check to see if it's the biggest so far. If it is, you're gonna keep it. If not, you're just gonna keep going. And then you're gonna force the sum to be a double here because they put them all in as integers. I would have probably just made sum and average into doubles. If you don't parse it and don't force one of them to be a double, you'll probably get a warning message or a cautionary thing that says possible loss of precision, and it's going to drop the decimal places. And if you do integer math if you have two integers doing division, it drops the decimal place. It just keeps the whole number. It doesn't round up, it just drops it. Does that make sense? Y'all remember that from way back, right? So that's the reason on line 25, it's using the parsing command to force one of them to be a double, because as long as one of them's a double, the answer is a double. The easier way to do this would have been just to make them all doubles when you did it to begin with. I don't know, Zybooks will let you get away with that since it very specifically said integers on there. Probably not, probably going to tell you, no, you can't do that. But anytime there's math involved, I generally go ahead and just make everything doubles, because that way, if in the future I change it, need to do something else with it, I don't have to worry about losing my decimal places. And decimal places are important because, you know, there's a Hubble telescope floating around in space that had to have millions of dollars worth of repairs on day one because they got the decimal places in the wrong place, converting from centimeters to inches and vice versa. So decimal places are important. Math's important. So does that make sense? Had you written this by yourself, where would you have got hung up?
I'd say for me, from the start, getting my variables, because it's actually in my, it pretty much states. I would say probably getting a while loop created and stuff, potentially.
So you use a while loop, you know why a while loop was chosen instead of a for loop, I guess is the question, the first question I have.
I don't see any indication on here unless, you know.
No, this is a decision you had to make.
Okay.
They didn't tell you. The reason you use a while loop here generally is if you can ever think to yourself, I'm going to do this until, you're going to use a while loop. Because the until is kind of undefined. You may do it one time, you might do it 100 times. A for loop usually has, you have a general idea that there is a set number of times you're going to do it. So you have an integer that's going to count up, an index that's going to count up, and it's going to be incremented by a certain number every time. So it's much more defined than a while loop. A while loop's more of a true or false. The test is either true or it's false, I'm going to do it. A for loop's going to let you adjust how often the increment goes up on the index. You could go up by 1 every time. It could go down by 1. It could go up by 5. It allows you to have more control, I guess, is a good way of saying it. So while loops I think of as a do until, and a for loop I think of as something I'm counting. I'm going to count to a certain point and then I'm done. All right, let's look at the other lab and see if I can do it without looking really stupid. All right, counting characters. Write a program whose input is a character and a string and whose output indicates the number of times the character appears in the string. The output should include the input character and use the plural form. And so the number of time the character appears, not exactly one. I want to correct their English. Okay. So you're going to have two different print statements in this one. If it's a single N, you don't put the S on it. If it's multiple N's, you want it to say N's plural. Like here. See, it's one is just an N. It's getting nitpicky on its printouts. So this is also going to be probably a while loop because you're going to go the length of the character, the length of the string. I didn't look at the answer to this one, so we'll see. All right, so where we're going to start. Do you need a scanner? Yes, we do. I never remember this line of code. The system dot. No.
This, your scanner, this is R equals new scanner. Oh, parentheses, system dot.
System in.
So dot.
This is why I miss having an IDE, Eclipse IDE that will fill in things for me. All right, so definitely need a scanner. We are going to read in a character and a string. So we're going to need a variable to hold a character and a string, right? We'll call it letter. They'll probably call it something else. And we're going to need a string. We'll call it word for lack of anything else. I don't know if I assume it's going to be a word. Oh, I guess it would be a phrase. Let's call it phrase. Right? And then letter equal scanner next char. And phrase equal scanner next string, if I'm not mistaken. And I could be mistaken. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. So we're working through some of the labs and proving that Zybooks hates me.
That's a bid, which is one of the.
Mhm.
Maybe I can't.
Yeah, laptops in the car. All right, so that's variables I know I need. And I'm gonna need some sort of counter to keep up with how many letters are there, right? So. It's a number, so I'm initializing it to 0. That's just what I do. All right. Now, I want to go through my string one character at a time, right? And I want to compare it to the letter. How would you guys suggest we do that?
As far as what
The loop, we're going to need a loop where we're going to navigate our string one character at a time. Initially, I thought we were going to use a while, but I think we're actually going to need a for. for int I equal to 0. I is less than phrase dot length. I'm getting my Python and my Java mixed up. I plus plus. So in my head, this makes sense because I'm going to set up an index. It's going to keep up with where I'm at inside of the string. Every letter in the string has an index number. The string knows how long it is, right? So I want to go from 0 to the last element of my string, which is length minus 1, because of that whole counting by 0 thing. And I want to go up 1 each time. At least one of you is nodding along with me, so I'm not completely off track. Does that make sense? Yeah, I've done enough with strings to know how to navigate a string. So in here, I can set up an if statement where if the letter is equal to string commands. I'm fixing to go look this up. Before you get too far gone, I'm gonna go look this up, make sure I get it right.
Could you use contain?
You could, but I'm not sure you wouldn't need a loop to do it with contains, because wouldn't it just return, contains would just turn yes or no, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't count how many it had. So if you just needed to verify that the letter was in there once, yes, contains would be a good option. But since you need to count how many times it's in there, it's not going to give you the output that you want.
Could you zoom in on the screen by chance?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. Hey guys, is that better?
Wait, wait.
You have to remind me of these things. I'm looking at this screen. Look how big it is over here. You know, I'm blind to the bad. All right, so that now you can see it better, right? Then in here, we're going to make count equal to count plus 1, right? And then make sure you close your. So that makes sense? Get one charge?
No.
You just decided not to?
Wi-Fi not working.
You're just not having a good day today, are you? It's okay. We all have bad days. So I didn't like the next char. Let's continue. All right. Really got to stop using Python and Java the same day. It's a bad idea. All right, so this part's right, but it doesn't like the next char, which I don't understand. Let's see what kind of error it gives me. I need something that has an A in it. Is it always this slow, or is it just my computer it doesn't like?
It's always that slow.
Oh, that should have been a double. Yeah. There are days I like Python better. It's easier. That should be right. All right, so y'all didn't call me on my comparisons. You know, those kids in Python, they'll call me out on an error like nobody's business. Y'all really are letting me get away with stupid stuff today.
It's,
Oh, yeah. Because in Python, it's abbreviated. Is it a method instead of an attribute? Yeah, I'm gonna trash this video because it makes me look like I don't know what I'm doing.
No, it's just that was just tripping.
I didn't capitalize the L in line. Swapping back and forth between camel case and underscores kills me too. There's no output because I never wrote the output lines, but at least it's running at this point. I need to go brush up on the scanner functions, obviously, because I thought I could do that without having to do it in lines, but hey, whatever makes them happy. Okay, so we have it testing. Now we need some input, some outputs. So we know we're going to have if statements for the output because our example says if in it. It's pretty much a big clue. So the output is going to be here. Oh. Okay, is it plus signs or commas in Java? Commas in Python. I was typing over there. I put that space in there because you know. All right, so if I didn't care about the plural, I could do it in one print line, right? But I do care about the plural, right? So I'm going to have to make an if statement for my prints. So what am I checking for? Or you could do if count is greater than 1. Either one will work. So you could do count equal 1. And then you could use the print line that I just created, right? Else. Oh, I guess I'll make it look pretty. Oh, you need that special character for that. Oh. I don't know if that'll work or not. We'll see. Might need a formatting thing for the apostrophe. We'll just have to see if it works or not. So let's see. So now it should have 2. That makes sense? So if I submitted it, I should get a perfect grade, right? Let's see if that looks like so. Where's the grade? I made it so big I can't see. It won't let me scroll to the right. There's no scroll bar to the right.
It's a R and then 2.
Okay.
So
That's, make it big enough for you guys to read it. Doesn't mean we can actually, this is not a very optimized web page. We'll just go with that. So is this helpful doing code together?
It's not hard and complicated.
Well, yeah, I've got 20+ years experience on you. Does it help for me to talk through why I chose it? Because I think that's what a lot of beginners are missing is the experience on how to pick those key factors out. In a long assignment, like these are really short, but in a long assignment, like when I gave you that project thing, one of the things I would usually do as a student, and even I've carried it over into when I was working in the real world and while I'm teaching, is I would go through and underline, I'm old school, I print stuff out. I would underline everything I thought had to be a variable. And when you get into objects and classes, I would go through and I'd circle everything that I thought was going to have to be a class all by itself. Does that make sense? And what you can do, and a good rule of thumb when you're starting to build classes and methods and stuff for a class, is the nouns are going to be your classes or your objects, and the verbs are going to be your methods. So if you had a class that was supposed to be for a student, then everything the student could do would become a verb, would be a verb in the write-up, would be a method. And then your attributes would be all the individual pieces that make a student unique. That helps. Because I know when I was teaching younger students, one of the hardest things for them to wrap their minds around was knowing what pieces they needed. Deconstructing the assignment specifics where you could rebuild it in code. Questions? Have any of you done the labs that are assigned and did grading?
The first two.
Do you have any questions on them? Fairly simple.
They
Illustrative.
were too bad. And I think
Well, the last one I gave you was one of the ones that is a bit more of a challenge. So let me know if you run into any questions there. I did that on purpose. I gave you two that I thought were fairly straightforward. And I did actually go read them before I gave them to you. Wanted to make sure there was no crazy math in any of them. I'm getting better at this online coursework material stuff. Just let me know when it gets crazy. Also, if you do have questions that you'd like me to handle on the board or something, let me know. We definitely can work through some stuff again like this, and then, hey, look, now I can see my grade. Go from there. So I'm going to throw one more up on the screen, and I'm not going to do it. We got about, what, 25 minutes or so? No, 20 minutes or so. I'm going to throw the last one up there that I didn't give you. Did I give you 17 or did I give you 18?
you guys said,
Okay, so 18. And I'm gonna unhide it where you can see it and work on it. As a group, you guys, you four that are in here, go ahead and work on it together and see if that helps. And then I'll answer questions. Or I'll stand here and y'all tell me what to type on the board. Which one works better? I know I'm going to make you talk to each other, but it's okay. You don't have to be introverts all the time.
You said which one?
It's 18. So 18 wants you to write a program whose input is 2 integers and whose output is the first integer and subsequent increments of 5, as long as the value is less than or equal to the second integer. So basically, this is just a loop. Well, it's a loop that it wants you to count up by 5 every time. But it wants you to have the stopping point of the second number. So you have a starting point, which is the first number. Stopping point is the second number. And you're going to count up by 5. You're going to print out the value.
So this takes a formula.
Probably. I would say that, absolutely. That incrementing by 5, you could do it in a while loop. I'm going to tell you the truth, you can do just about everything in a while loop that you can do in a for loop. It just takes a little more planning and thought.
First thing we're gonna need is a scanner.
Yeah, you definitely gotta do this.
I need that for sure.
But anytime he says input, you're gonna need the scanners.
Scanner, then let's try to find our variables. So since we're adding, we definitely gonna need a sum variable. We can set, we can initialize that to 0. So what else? So I'm guessing our input is gonna be a high number, and then both our inputs, one's gonna be like the max value, one's gonna be a minimum value. Because just by looking at that input,
So you're gonna input two integers. The first one is going to be added to, it's the one you're gonna add the 5 to. The second one is the number you're gonna use to test to see if you're stopping. So
Why we need.
honestly, you don't have to do this with a for loop. I'm thinking really quickly here that a while loop would work because you could do while sum is less than, oh, we didn't declare variables for actual numbers, so int,
First month.
I'm gonna call it start. And then end, because I'm clever that way. And then we'll have to do start equals scanner next int, I hope works for this. I'm gonna go brush up on scanner functions. This is why I have Eclipse to give me my options. I just talk them out. While sum is less than end. Did it say less than or equal to or just less than?
Less than or less than equal.
While that is that way, you're gonna so you need to print the original number. They aren't talking to me. I'm just writing code again.
So you wouldn't print the start or the end the loop, would you?
According to this output, you do. Because the negative 16 is there. So I would say you would go back at this point. First thing I would do is I'd check to make sure that end is not smaller. So I put an if statement in that says if end is less than start, print whatever it was, this line, second integer. Cannot be smaller than the first one, right? If that's the case, then I think I would just move my while loop into here. Because you don't need the while, you don't need to do anything until then. The print statement's what I'm working on now. How do I print the original and the ones after it? So I know I'm at least gonna print the first one, no matter what, if I get to this point, because it's gonna run. Right? So I want to print start, and it said put a space between them, so I'll go ahead and put the space in. And then when I get down here, I'm going to do the sum, and the sum is going to be it would be for the first one, but it wouldn't be for the ones after that.
Some 0.5 after that.
Which is not a good way to do this. I got too many things. I don't think we need some at all. I'm going to eliminate some. I don't think we need it. So we do start here. And then we make start. So we don't really need some. We could use some, but we don't need it. We could just, at this point, change start every time because we're not using it again for what we're doing. And we can just do in the print statement, print out the new value of start and its space, right? And if I didn't do anything really stupid, that should work theoretically. So 1:15. I have some. Yeah. Let's bracket off. There's something it doesn't like. I'm not sure what yet.
The first one, you don't want it to be print line. You just want it to be print.
Ah, yep. See, that's why I have you guys on.
The last print thing, or the-
Oh, yeah, we forgot the end number. Was it supposed to have end number? Did it go too far? Oh, it doesn't like that space after. This is, I hate formatting. I hate formatting strings. If it doesn't like the space being at the end, I'll just put it again.
So, but that one need to be a print line.
It can't be a print line because if you do a print line, each one will be on a different line. I hate formatting. Absolutely.
You need a space after, because it says, for cutting simplicity, I put a space after every image, including the last.
Okay, but I was doing that and it didn't seem to like it, so. Okay. So then I would still need one here. While start is less than. They did use a for loop. Okay. Let's put that for loops. That makes better sense. Like you said, equal to the start. And then do I is not one, I is less than. And you don't need this line. Or this line. You just need it to print what start is. See, even I over complex things. Or maybe I don't. Oh, change this to I. And that's actually probably a smarter way to do it because you're never changing what start and end are that way. Probably still hates me because it's iBooks. I don't know how to get the end of character thing. Oh, son of a gun. Again. I hate formatting output. I absolutely hate formatting output. You all can hate it too if you want to.
Yeah.
Now it works. Okay. I so overcomplex that one. I'm sorry. Even I overthink them. All right. I'm done if y'all are.